It's February 4th, 2019, and it's time to review 5 of the most outrageous, infuriating, or just plain baffling things that have happened lately. It's your Facepalm 5. Let's count them up. Number 1, transphobes go on a global hate spree. So, week before last, the U.S. Supreme Court allowed Trump's ban on transgender people serving in the military to go into effect while its legality is decided in lower courts. I made a whole video last week about why that's a shitty idea that nobody who isn't an intolerant asshole should support, so if you want to hear me go on about the trans military ban, go watch that video. In this segment of this video, I'm going to mention a few of the other attempts to disenfranchise and dehumanize trans people that went down over the last couple of weeks, because there were a bunch of them. First, last week in Washington, D.C., a contingent of TERFs, that's trans-exclusionary radical feminists for those of you who aren't hip to the lingo, participated in a panel hosted by the Heritage Foundation. The purpose of the panel was to raise objections to the Equality Act, a piece of legislation Nancy Pelosi has called a priority for the new Congress, which would officially ban discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity under federal civil rights law. Why would feminists have a problem with expanding civil rights protections? Good question. Also, why would feminists accept an invitation from a right-wing and blatantly anti-woman, anti-LGBTQ outfit like the Heritage Foundation? Two good questions, both with the same answer: anti-trans bigotry. TERFs like those who participated in the Heritage panel, and those who live-streamed themselves harassing trans activist Sarah McBride a few days later, because that happened too, believe trans women are men who are invading women-only spaces and are therefore a threat to women. That threat loses its force when you account for the fact that trans women are not men, but women. It's right there on the label. But TERFs don't account for that because they're bad people. Second, last week, Republican members of the South Dakota House of Representatives introduced a series of bills that could potentially be very harmful to trans children. Yeah, it's about time somebody stood up to the most bullied kind of kid. The bills would ban public schools from teaching about gender identity until 8th grade, give parents the right to refuse gender-affirming health care for their trans children, and force trans student-athletes to participate in school sports according to the gender they were assigned at birth. The old just ignore them and legally empower their parents and educators to abuse and discriminate against them and they'll go away strategy. That'll work. All right. There's one more, and it's really bad. Week before last, the Supreme Court of Japan ruled unanimously that trans people have to get sterilized. Transphobia in a country other than the United States? Yay, we're not the only bad place. The court ruled to uphold Law 111, which requires that trans people who want to legally change their gender designation be sterilized and undergo gender confirmation surgery before the change can be approved. This, according to the court's opinion, is acceptable because it helps to avoid confusion. Right, because if some people get confused and think that trans people are human beings entitled to rights and basic respect, this law will set them straight. Oh, but don't worry, it's not as bad as it sounds. 2 of the justices wrote an additional opinion where they acknowledge that the suffering experienced by trans people is everybody's problem and assert that society should be accepting of the diversity of sexual identity. So there, see? A little positivity from 2 of the judges who voted to keep the law that compels trans people to get sterilized in order to legally transition. I mean, why even write that opinion if you voted to uphold the transphobic law? Your words, however well-intentioned, are rendered meaningless by your actions. Hey, do you have to be from Japan in order to serve on the Japanese Supreme Court? Because if not, next time there's a vacancy, they should totally nominate Jeff Flake. He'd fit right in. Number 2, McConnell accuses Democrats of attempted power grab for wanting to make it easier to vote. Mitch McConnell took to the floor of the United States Senate last week to denounce Bill H.R. 1, the For the People Act, which was recently introduced by Democrats in the House of Representatives. McConnell called the bill a political power grab that would victimize every American taxpayer. Jesus, this bill must be pretty bad, huh? Want to know what's in it? Automatic voter registration, making Election Day a federal holiday, prohibiting voter roll purges, ending partisan gerrymandering, stricter campaign finance regulations. How could our democracy survive? That's the question Mitch McConnell seems to be asking. I, on the other hand, am wondering how our democracy has survived so long without this stuff. McConnell belittled the bill, calling it the Democratic Politician Protection Act, saying its provisions didn't pass the laugh test. So, if someone proposes that we make it easier for people to vote and increase regulations and oversight to help ensure elections are free and fair, and your response is to laugh and accuse them of attempting a partisan power grab, I can only conclude two things. One, you're a huge asshole, and two, you're worried your political party won't be able to win elections if it can't cheat. Look, I hate the Republican Party. I've thought it was garbage for years, but even I am still a little shocked at how brazenly corrupt it's become. Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, read this bill that would protect people's right to vote, make it easier for everyone to exercise that right, and protect the integrity of the electoral process, and he was like, "This is outrageous. The Republican Party could never survive this. They're trying to destroy us." Then he went out and said all of that in public. Number 3, clueless billionaire baffled by backlash against vanity presidential run. Howard Schultz, who got rich overcharging people for just okay coffee, announced recently that he is considering a run for president of the United States in 2020. A lot of people are annoyed by that, and Schultz just don't get it. The former CEO of Starbucks, Schultz also has a new book to promote, which looks like exactly the kind of shallow, excessively focus group drivel every other aspiring presidential candidate publishes a year or two before the election. The opposition to Schultz's candidacy has come mostly from Democrats and those further to the left, something Schultz says he's surprised by. But since he started talking about running for president, Schultz has come out against Medicare for all, against raising taxes on the wealthiest Americans, accused his detractors of criticizing him for being successful, and declared that he left the Democratic Party because it was too far left. Did he expect progressives to applaud for that shit? And please, for God's sake, can we stop putting super rich people on TV and letting them whine and fearmonger about tax proposals that would make them slightly less rich? A top marginal tax rate of 70% or higher is not going to make billionaires into hobos. For one thing, even if we did raise taxes so high that billionaires lost all their money, most of them wouldn't be hobos. They'd be bums. Hobos work. Number 4, Republican member of Congress throws bigoted tantrum. I realize you need me to be more specific. To wit, Representative Ilhan Omar, a Democrat from Minnesota and one of the first Muslim women to serve in the U.S. House of Representatives, was recently selected for the Oversight and Investigation Subcommittee of the House Committee on Foreign Affairs. This probably would have been no big deal, except that Republican member of Congress from New York, Lee Zeldin, who is also on that subcommittee, tweeted, "Just learned freshman Representative Ilhan Omar was also put on this committee with oversight of U.S. foreign policy. Crazy to watch what House Dems are empowering/elevating." Representative Omar hit back with a tweet of her own, implying that Zeldin is an Islamophobic bully and saying she looked forward to watching him lose his marbles. Zeldin responded to that by promptly losing his marbles. "Those poor innocent ISIS fighters and Palestinian terrorists, right?" Zeldin tweeted, adding, "Your anti-Semitic and anti-Israel hate is strong and wrong." Now, to be fair to Zeldin, there is a lot of pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel rhetoric that does cross the line into anti-Semitism. I don't think Representative Omar has been guilty of that, but it does happen. And after their Twitter fight, Zeldin released a hateful message left on his office voicemail that called Jews maggots and bloodsuckers and declared they were worse than Hitler. That is obviously unacceptable and disgusting, and Representative Omar quite rightly condemned it. There should be no place in politics for that kind of derogatory, dehumanizing rhetoric. But here's the thing, that's true when the target is a Jewish man, and it's also true when the target is a Muslim woman. If Zeldin expects Omar to disown the hatred, ignorance, and intolerance anti-Semites throw at him, the least he can do is do the same for the hatred, ignorance, and intolerance Islamophobes throw at her. And he can start by apologizing for publicly flipping out over her being appointed to a committee and accusing her of sympathizing with ISIS. And when he's done that, he can also apologize for inviting Steve Bannon to headline a fundraiser during his election campaign and for supporting and continuing to support Donald Trump. And if he's not willing to do that, maybe he should just shut the fuck up. And now it's time for the segment devoted to some of the other things Donald Trump has done recently to disgrace the presidency and embarrass and/or endanger the United States and the rest of the world. It's number 5, the further misadventures of Lord Dampnut. Please keep in mind, as always, the following is not a complete list. He reacted to the arrest of his former campaign advisor, Roger Stone, by declaring border coyotes, drug dealers, and human traffickers are treated better. That really depends on what color they are and how much money they've got, doesn't it? He tweeted his support for the smug little MAGA hat-wearing pricks from Covington Catholic who were involved in a confrontation with Native American activist Nathan Phillips in Washington, D.C. He lashed out against Democratic Senator Dick Blumenthal after Blumenthal expressed doubts about the truthfulness of Donald Trump Jr.'s testimony to Congress about possible collusion between Trump and Russia, calling Blumenthal Da Nang Dick and repeating the lie that Blumenthal had falsely claimed to be a Vietnam War hero and later admitted the truth with tears pouring down his face. He criticized leaders of the intelligence community for being extremely passive and naive in their assessment of the threat posed by Iran during testimony to the Senate Intelligence Committee, then, after meeting with them the next day, declared that the intelligence community actually agreed with him, and their testimony was mischaracterized by the media. Their testimony was aired live as it happened. How did the media mischaracterize their testimony? By showing us what they said? He endorsed Bible classes in public schools, which the ACLU has said often violate the separation of church and state because teachers use Sunday school lessons as class materials. And finally, he met at the White House with a group of far-right activists that included Frank Gaffney of the Center for Security Policy, an organization designated as an anti-Muslim hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center, and Rosemary Jenks of Numbers USA, an extremist anti-immigration group. During the meeting, according to the New York Times, one activist told Trump that women shouldn't be allowed to serve in the military, while another denounced same-sex marriage, and another expressed skepticism that sexual assault was all that common in the military. In any other administration, it would be alarming and profoundly upsetting to learn that such ignorant, intolerant people had gotten a meeting with the president. But now, I don't know, I'm not so much alarmed or upset as I am confused. Why would Trump need to waste time inviting people to the White House to hear this kind of rhetoric when he can get fed the exact same bullshit from people who already work for him? That's 5. Speak out, act out, resist, look after each other. Hey folks, hope you got something out of this one. If you did, please click like and share the video and subscribe to this channel if you're not subbed already. And also, please consider helping me to make more videos like this one by supporting this channel with a monthly donation through Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/Steve Shives to become a patron of this channel for only $1 a month. And believe me, those $1 a month pledges really add up and help me out like you would not believe. But if you can afford it, and you think I'm worth it, and you pledge at a level of $5 a month or more, you get yourself a shout out at the end of the Facepalm 5, just like these fine folks who are my newest $5 or more per month patrons. Rudiger Ludwig, thank you Rudiger. Neil Payne, thank you Neil. Thomas Dinsdale Young. Thank you, Thomas. And Aaron O'Connell. Thank you, Aaron. Thanks to all of my patrons at whatever level you're pledging, however long you've been pledging. Thanks to all of you for your support in whatever form it takes, whether you're a patron or you just like and share and watch the videos. I appreciate your support in whatever form it takes. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.